We're here with human rights activist, public speaker, author, Nani Darwish, author of The Devil We Don't Know, The Dark Side of Revolutions in the Middle East. Nice to speak with you today.
Thank you.
First, tell us about your background.
I was born and raised as a Muslim in Cairo, Egypt. I grew up in the 50s as a child in the Gaza Strip. And my father headed the Egyptian military intelligence in Gaza. Egypt at that time ruled Gaza. So my whole childhood was in the heart of the Arab-Israeli conflict. I was in the direct confrontation on the border between Gaza and Israel. And Egypt had headed the Fidaiyin operations under my father's authority against Israel. The word Fidai means a man who's ready to self-sacrifice his life. And they entered into Israel, caused as much damage and destruction as possible. And Israel was suffering, of course, from these attacks. And one did try to retaliate, of course, to end it. And they had several assassination attempts on my father to end the Fidaiyin operations. And finally, they succeeded. And my father was killed. I was 8 years old, and I grew up in Gaza elementary schools. We never learned anything about peace or living in peace with the Jewish people. It was all about destroying Israel, destroying the Jews wherever we find them. And peace was never an option. It was all about jihad and martyrdom, unfortunately. And my father was assassinated and killed, and that was a big trauma, of course, in my life. We moved back to Cairo, and the president of Egypt, Gamal Abdel Nasser, came to our home to pay condolences because my father was a high-ranking officer. And I remember him coming in the home, in our home, and my mom made me and my siblings stand in line to greet President Gamal Abdel Nasser. And I remember him and his entourage asking us, which one of you kids will avenge your father's blood by killing Jews? And I remember very uncomfortable with that question, because it made me feel that if I really love my father, then I must hate Jews, I must want to kill Jews. And that's why I remember that question until today. I lived in Egypt for the next couple of decades and moved to the United States at the end of the year 1978.
What is the purpose of your book, The Devil We Don't Know, The Dark Side of Revolutions in the Middle East?
I wrote The Devil We Don't Know because the world was under the impression that finally the Middle East will have freedom and democracy. Finally, they will get rid of all these dictators. I was looking in Tahrir Square for some signs that will tell me that there is change, that change is coming, true change. But I didn't find it. I was looking for a sign that says separation of mosque and state. I was looking for a sign that says beating of a wife is not a man's legal right. I was looking for a sign that says equal rights under the law for women, equal rights under the law for Christians, non-Muslims. I couldn't find any of that. All I found were quotes that says Mubarak must be gone, Mubarak must leave, which I understand. But the problems of the Middle East are far more complicated than just the removal of a dictator.
Will the Arab Spring bring freedom and democracy to the Muslim world, and why?
There's a cycle of revolutions in all of the Middle East. Every 50, 60 years, you'll find a coup d'etat or a revolution followed by a period of a honeymoon period with the new leader. And then everything collapses and it goes back to dictatorships. In 1952, there was a coup d'etat against a constitutional monarchy that was quite secular in Egypt. And that revolution brought a military rule to Egypt by Gamal Abdel Nasser at that time. Gamal Abdel Nasser in Tahrir Square changed the name of the square from Ismailia Square to Tahrir Square, meaning Freedom Square, symbolizing the new era of freedom. He even changed the Egyptian constitution. He changed the name of Egypt, which is a historical name for 5,000 years. Egypt is no longer called Egypt. It is going to be allied now with Arabia. The name of Egypt at that time was changed to the United Arab Republic, and the historical name of Egypt was removed. He also started a constitution for new flag for Egypt. It was, according to what he says, a new country is born. There was a lot of hope. But what Nasser brought to Egypt was one of the darkest periods of Egyptian history. Nasser turned Egypt into a tyrannical police state. He started a socialist system. He confiscated property of all the talented Egyptians, the hardworking Egyptians. He confiscated their property. A lot of Jews were kicked out of Egypt. A lot of foreigners left the country, and Egypt became an economic basket case, and all Egypt did was go to war after war after war with Israel until the country was completely bankrupt. Unfortunately, revolutions in the Middle East are a cycle of tyranny, dictatorships, and revolutions. And they cannot seem to get themselves out of it.
What is the basic idea in your chapter, A Muslim's Burden, How Islam Fails the Individual?
In every society, religion plays a very important role in equipping the individual with the proper values, the proper norms, the proper behavior, encouraging the proper behavior in them, to live a harmonious life, to have, democracy and freedom does not come from the top to the bottom. It has to start at the bottom. The people have to have the proper value system to allow democracy and freedom to happen. And for instance, the Judeo-Christian culture has greatly influenced the Constitution of the United States. The people were in harmony with that Constitution, and they succeeded for many decades in accomplishing an organized system, a system that succeeds in giving proper human rights for people, the dignity of the human spirit. But unfortunately, in Muslim countries, you can see how the individuals have failed to be equipped with the proper value system that will allow freedom and democracy to flourish. Why is that? Why is our Muslim societies so handicapped in allowing the human freedoms and the human spirit to flourish and to achieve respect and dignity for human rights? And I'll tell you why. In Muslim societies, there are sheikhs, Muslim sheikhs, high-ranking Muslim leaders who preach unbelievable things to the Muslim people. I'll give you an example. There's a sheikh by the name of Abu Ishaq al-Huwaini, and he has a video on the internet preaching sexual slavery and slavery of people. And he blames the poverty of the Muslim world because they have abandoned jihad. And if Muslims go back to doing jihad, which she meant war, conquering other nations and taking their property and their women and children as slaves, and that would make Muslim people very rich. And he blames the lack of wealth in Muslim countries. He blames it on the lack of jihad, which means going to war against non-Muslim countries. That sheikh is one of the stars on Arab TV and Egyptian TV. And this is what he is teaching his students. That jihad, violent jihad against non-Muslims is good. That slavery of non-Muslims is a virtue. And seizing their property is something good. And you can get rich this way. Is this the proper value system that a religion should teach their subjects? It is unbelievable. By Western standards, this is unthinkable. But in the Middle East, this is normal. This is education. Another value system that Sharia teaches, and Muslim, sheikhs teach it everywhere, that exaggeration, lying, and slander for the purpose of Islam is okay. And it's not okay, you're obliged to lie if it's for the purpose of fulfilling an obligation as a Muslim. And when you give some Muslims this kind of value system, it is not the kind of value system that will make them prosper and live in peace and harmony. Vengeance has been prescribed to you according to the Quran. Vengeance is a commandment in the holy books of Islam. That makes the average Muslim always looking behind him to the back and not forward to solve his problem. He is retaining all the problems of the past and want to do vengeance. And that's why they erupt in violence and vengeful activities that can only hurt them in the long run. Redemption and forgiveness are not taught in Islam. Forgiveness of their enemies, loving your enemies, doesn't exist in Muslim scriptures. For instance, another important concept, the act of insulting Muhammad under Sharia law is an act punishable by death. And any Muslim who hears a person cursing Muhammad or insulting Islam will be forgiven for killing an apostate. They are automatically an apostate, and a Muslim will be forgiven for killing an apostate. Islam tells the Muslim on the street it's okay to do vigilante street justice under certain conditions. So a Muslim is burdened with venging Muhammad, with venging God himself on the streets. He becomes judge and executioner. That burdens the Muslim individual a lot. In Christianity, Jesus came down to save people. In Islam, it's a Muslim's duty to save Muhammad and to save God. And that's why he's given the right to kill for the sake of Allah. A Muslim must kill for the sake of Allah. In Christianity, God came down to save us. It's a totally different concept.
How will the current situation in the Middle East affect Israel?
Yeah, the situation now is very unstable in Syria, even in Jordan, in Egypt, it's in Lebanon. So all around Israel, the situation is very unstable. There's going to be civil war. There's civil war in Syria. It might even get worse in Egypt. In Jordan, it's very unpredictable. And something usually happens when Arabs have internal problems, civil wars. To stop the civil war, the easiest thing they can do quickly is to shoot at Israel. And when they shoot at Israel, Israel shoots back. And that's when they unify again. And this is the problem that Israel might face today with all of the civil unrest around it, surrounding it. There is also a deep problem in Islam when it comes to the Jewish people. And I wrote in my chapter on Israel an explanation why the existence of the Jews is such an existential threat to Muslims, to Islam itself, to the credibility of Islam. Why? It goes back to the 7th century. In the 7th century, the Prophet Muhammad, on his deathbed, he commanded his followers, Muslims, to go after the Jews and kill them wherever you find them. This is the commandment of the Prophet of Islam at his deathbed to his followers. Why did he do that? Why was he so threatened by the Jewish people that he neglected to entrust his people with something holy instead of entrusting them to kill Jews? And this is the reason. Muhammad, his main purpose was to convert the Jews, to make them Muslims. When the Jewish people, the Jewish tribes, refused to convert to Islam, Muhammad's credibility was totally threatened when the Jewish people refused to convert to Islam. He felt that the people of the book, who are the Jews, should accept him as their Messiah. And when they did not, he felt threatened. His own people told him, even the people of the book don't believe in you. And that's when Muhammad killed 800 Jewish men from one tribe, beheaded them. And he took their wives as sexual slaves and their children. That act by itself, by a prophet of God, was an unholy act. And it came a point in the ministry of Muhammad to either face it. Either I am a murderer of the Jewish people, or they are not human. They deserve to be killed. They are apes, pigs, and enemies of Allah. And that's what Muhammad decided. That not only will he kill the Jews wherever he finds them, but his followers forever, till the day of resurrection, will kill Jews wherever he finds them. Judaism and the Jewish people are an existential threat by their mere existence to Islam and to Muhammad himself, and that's why his followers until today cannot make true peace with the Jewish people. Unfortunately, it's an existential threat for Islam.
Why isn't there an Islamic feminist movement?
Why don't we see Muslim women march in the streets and ask for equal rights? The reason is such an act by a Muslim woman will be considered an act of apostasy. A Muslim woman who rejects Sharia law, which condemns her to the level of apostate, if she doesn't like, for instance, the law that states that she will have the inheritance of a man. There is a law, for instance, that say that a woman's testimony in court is half the value of a man. A Muslim woman who stands against such laws will be considered immediately an apostate. And there are a few Muslim women who were killed, actually, or threatened with death because they wanted equal rights under the law. What does that leave Muslim women with? Either a death penalty and degradation and humiliation in society, or what are the other avenues open for women? We cannot find a feminist movement in the Muslim world. It's very little. And it's usually, the Muslim feminists today never touch the topic of Sharia or the law. They always say that, oh, Islam has misinterpreted the position about women and we have to reinterpret it, but Islam really respects women. So they play around the topic and they never really say what is needed to be said. And that's why for a Muslim woman to get respect, to have a good position in society, for a Muslim woman to be powerful in Muslim society, she has to be as radical, if not more radical, than the men. So we see, for instance, a Muslim mother who stands in front of the camera and says, I will give my children to jihad. My son has died for jihad, and I want to give the rest of my children for jihad. What does that mean? It means I support jihad, I support Sharia. And what happens to this woman? She's elevated in Muslim society like a saint. She is given a good pension. Some of them are given positions in the parliament. And women who defend Sharia are the ones who are respected. And that's why you find a lot of Muslim women, even educated ones, who defend Sharia, who defend polygamy, who defend the laws that oppress them, and stand and say we like it, and we approve of Sharia, and we're good Muslims, and we're wearing our head cover with pride. Some of them come here to teach on college campuses, and they teach that we are happy as Muslim women, and these are the ones that are picked to teach on college campuses right here in America, in Islamic Studies Department, in Middle East Studies Department, and they are sent by Saudi Arabia. This is their thank you gift, a position to teach on college campuses here in America and advocate that they're happy Muslim women.
How will the developments in the Middle East affect the West?
The world today is a small world. The Muslim world is no longer living in its own cocoon and the West in its own cocoon. We are one small world now where everybody affects everybody else. There are many Muslims who live in the West. Many of them are demanding Sharia law as a religious right. In England, they've achieved some aspects of Sharia law. In America, they are trying to prevent any laws that prevents Sharia or foreign laws from being practiced in America. And the West needs to understand, learn from history. How can the West learn from history? Look at the history of Islam in India, for instance. When Muslims were a minority in India, but a strong minority. And they eventually demanded Sharia law. They wanted a separatist movement. They don't want to live under Indian rule. They want to live under Islamic rule. And what happened? India split itself. They gave them a part of a country called Pakistan today and India. What happened? India split itself apart. Did it cause them to live in peace with Pakistan? Is India and Pakistan living in peace today? No, they are the number one enemy of India is Pakistan, and vice versa. Why? Because Pakistan doesn't end there. Now Kashmir wants to be an Islamic state. They want Kashmir to join the Islamic part of India. And terrorism still happens in India that comes all the way from Pakistan. It's never ending. It can happen in the West. What happens in Chechnya, in Russia? It's the same thing. An area of Russia that's populated by majority Muslim, and they want Sharia law. They want a separatist movement. They don't want to be ruled by an infidel state, which is the Russian government. And they are just blowing things up because they want to have a separatist movement from Russia. Same thing with Kosovo. Same thing in the Philippines. There is a minority Muslims in the Philippines who want to secede from the rest of the nation. I predict there will be a Chechnya in France in a couple of decades. There's already a no-go zone in France for the police. Same thing in England. We can have a Chechnya here in America. In 30, 40, 50 years, we can leave a disaster for our children. A civil war that is non-winnable, that they have to live. And America can be torn apart between those who want Sharia and those who don't want Sharia. What America is doing today is it's not admitting there is a problem. And as a matter of fact, in our media, among our politicians, people who are standing up against Sharia, which condemn women to stoning for sexual violations. We cannot even dare speak about Sharia, because under Sharia, anyone who leaves Islam must be killed immediately. That's what the law says, immediately. And I'm being called an Islamophobe. Why? Because I'm afraid of a law that condemns me to death. The word phobia means unreasonable fear. I believe that my fear of Sharia is very reasonable. Who would not fear a law that condemns people to death for sexual violations, for leaving a religion, for insulting the religion, for criticizing the religion? This is a tyranny. This is the dark ages that we must understand. And every American should understand that we should be standing united. And unfortunately, America is divided. It's divided even about Sharia, which it's the liberals in America should be the number one people who should stand against Sharia, because it condemns gay people to death. But unfortunately, even the gay community are still leftists and still support Sharia, and they're still calling me Islamophobe. The West has a problem, and they are feeding the monster. The West is giving a lifeline to a tyrannical system and a tyrannical legal system. And unfortunately, that's not even helping Muslims. Those who are calling me Islamophobe are not helping Islam. They are not helping Muslims. They're not helping America. They're not helping themselves. America should wake up.
In your last chapter, you say Islam is a house of cards. Could you elaborate?
The number one enemy of Islam is the truth. If you go to Muslim countries, they have distorted history. They have distorted the truth. They approve of lying, exaggeration, and slander. And this is done by men of God in the mosques. For instance, in the mosque, they advocate that Israel is behind the non-success of the revolutions. They claim that Israel, in Arab TV, there was a sheikh and a scientist who claimed that Israel went to Haiti to help with the earthquake in Haiti. Not because of the goodness of their heart to help the Haitian people, but because they wanted to harvest the organs of the Haitian people for medical purposes. If you see that your leaders on TV, your religious leaders, your educators on Arab TV are lying like that, it is a system that's built on lies. It's a system that doesn't want to see reality and the truth. And eventually, a system like that will not survive. And I believe Islam as it's practiced today is like a house of cards. It's like a pyramid scheme that must constantly expand by new blood, by getting new people in, by expanding in the West, by expanding in America, by expanding in Europe. Because if they don't get new blood, they will collapse on themselves. It's like a pyramid scheme. It has to keep feeding the bottom in order to keep going. And unfortunately, Muslims who love their religion still don't want to face reality. They don't want to get along with the rest of the world as equals. They are still in the mode of conquering the West, conquering the world. And we have seen many ideologies. The conquering ideologies of the world all vanished because a conquering ideology does not fulfill the needs of the people. It's an ideology of idealism that can never be achieved. And that's why Muslims are very unhappy with their situation. And they can only blame the West. But there's a time by which they have to stop and say, we must start blaming ourselves. Without that, they will never avoid a total collapse of Islamic countries. It is Muslims who love their religion and who love their society and who love their people, who want to survive, who should face the truth and who should handle life from the point of view of truth and not fiction. I no longer believe in Islam. So I don't believe that people who don't believe in an ideology can reform it. I cannot reform Islam, and that's why I left Islam. It's up to the people who call themselves Muslims, who genuinely believe in the religion, to reform it. It's very obvious that Islamism and Islam is causing international problems. We have terrorism from Islamists all over the world. There is a problem, and any honest Muslim should realize that. The West has a lot of issues about Islam. They have a lot of questions. They're worried. And their questions need honest answers. Only committed Muslims need to be honest with the West and speak to them about what the West is worried about. The West is worried about its freedom, its democracy, its constitution. And Muslims need, first of all, to get along with the rest of the world. And right now, Islam cannot get along with the rest of the world. And it needs a reformation. It needs a reformation because there is a lot of Muslims all over the world who are yearning for freedom and democracy. And they cannot have it under the Islamic State. There is a lot of soul searching that Muslims need to do. And they are the ones who can answer you if Islam is reformable or not. But as to me, I don't believe that it's reformable. It's up to Muslims who believe in it to find it reformable or not.